I recently posted a video talking about how every single member of Team 7 ended up training with the wrong Sani. And in that video, I stated that Sasuke should have ended up training with Jiraiya, as I believe that Sasuke training with Jiraiya would allow for him to hone his focus on his flame release, as Jiraiya was one of the greatest non-Sarutobi, non-Uchiha fire users in all of Naruto. And on top of that, if hypothetically Sasuke was to train with Jiraiya, he also would have been able to address some of the other glaring weaknesses in his kit, like the fact that he's really the only member of Team 7 outside of Kakashi that doesn't have an ability to either store chakra or refill their own chakra. And thus it only made logical sense to me that if Sasuke was to go off and train with Jiraiya, that he would come back from that training with a Sage mode like Naruto did. And thus in this scenario, as Sasuke would have had a Sage mode heading into the 4th Great Shinobi World War, when he had received Hagoromo's chakra and gained the 6 Tomei Rinnegan, he effectively would have become a new generation Sage of 6 Paths, especially if we assume in this universe that he's also going to become a pseudo 10-tails Jinchuriki when taking all of the 9-tailed beasts and putting them in a Chibaku Tensai. So in this hypothetical universe where Sasuke did train with Jiraiya, he would end up a lot stronger than he did in the main storyline, possibly stronger than a peak strength Madara. However, because I asked this hypothetical, I got a resurgence of people asking me a question that they've been asking me for years, which is, what would the Naruto universe look like if Sasuke never left? And as somebody who's done tons and tons of what ifs on this channel, this is by far and away the most common one that gets recommended for me to do. But for years I've put it off because fundamentally it's one of the harder what ifs to answer. Sasuke leaving Konoha is the entire point of Naruto Shippuden, and thus figuring out what Shippuden looks like in a world where Sasuke never leaves is a tough one. However, I've sat down with my handy dandy notebook and thought about the entirety of every single event that happens in Naruto Shippuden and how they would be different if Sasuke was still a part of Team 7. So now, to put the question to rest once and for all, today we're talking, what if Sasuke never left Konoha? But before we get to tackling one of the more difficult what ifs we've ever done on this channel, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. But before we get into all that, today we're gonna talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, BetterHelp. Listen, the stress of running 4 pages has been getting to me recently, and I had begun a dangerous cycle of conflating my worth with the success of those 4 pages. If things weren't going well on an individual page, I found it hard to get out of bed. I found it hard to find motivations to do things. I stopped working out. I stopped eating well. And it's at that point that I realized that I need to get into therapy. And that's where BetterHelp came into play. See, not only did BetterHelp make finding a therapist incredibly easy, as all I had to do was fill out an incredibly simple questionnaire telling BetterHelp what was going on with me and what I was looking for in a therapist, and then within 48 hours, I was connected with a licensed therapist. And BetterHelp claims that the vast majority of people who come to their website and fill out their questionnaire will be connected with a therapist within that 48-hour time frame. Now, my therapist has helped me establish ways to reinforce the parts of my life that aren't touched by work, which has allowed me to work on my appreciation for the things and people around me that I love and I am loved by. And I've worked with my therapist to trust myself more and allow that trust to free up time in my life to spend the time with the things and people who matter. So what are you waiting for? Don't wait until it's too late. If you're struggling and think you would benefit from a session of therapy, click the link in my description or go to betterhelp.com/nchammer and get 10% off your first month of therapy. There's no such thing as a bad time to take care of what's upstairs. So, for today's what if, we're gonna go ahead and assume that literally all of the plot points that happen up until Sasuke leaving the actual village still happen in this now diverted timeline. So, the Land of Waves arc, the Chunin exams, and the Konoha Crush arc all play out exactly the same. Sasuke is still brandished with a curse mark. It gets sealed by Kakashi. Sasuke begins to use his curse mark in battles against people like Zaku and Gaara. Sasuke is knocked out in the battle against Gaara, and Naruto swings in to save the day. And when Naruto and Sasuke meet each other on top of a hospital roof, they both approach each other with the intent to kill. However, where this hypothetical universe diverges from the main storyline is that after Sasuke sees the destructive ability of the Rasengan on the backside of a water tank, the conversation that he has with Kakashi, where Kakashi tells him that everybody who's important to him is already dead, actually resonates with Sasuke. And Sasuke realizes, and this is a vital import, that the only reason that Naruto is getting strong is because of how hard he's working. and thus instead of Sasuke deciding to take the shortcut that is Orochimaru, hoping that Orochimaru will have some kind of get-rich-quick scheme that will make him powerful enough to kill Itachi in the next couple of years, Sasuke instead marvels at the fact that Naruto has gone from zero to hero in this short amount of time simply through the back-breaking hard work he's been pulling off over the last couple of months. To me, that's really the only way we could ever justify Sasuke staying in the village. He would have to earn a respect for the strength that Naruto has gained. He would have to understand what Naruto has had to undergo to equal him in power. See, because it's not Sasuke's bloodlust of Itachi that drives him into the snaky arms of Orochimaru. No, it's the fact that Sasuke spends the majority of part 1 of Naruto kind of getting his ass beat. Rock Lee beats him, Gaara beats him, Naruto beats him, essentially on top of the hospital. And it's not until he begins to truly lean into the powers that Orochimaru gave him does he begin to see results. So in this hypothetical divergent timeline, Sasuke would have to throw out the idea of using the curse mark, even though it doesn't necessarily work like that, but somebody like Kakashi and or Jiraiya could seal it, and instead decide to follow in the footsteps of Naruto and work hard at the idea of achieving enough power that one day he'd be able to kill Itachi. And yes, if Sasuke stayed in Konoha, his goal would still be kill Itachi. Yes, absolutely. The more time that Sasuke spends with Team 7 over the course of part 1, the more it becomes very clear that his heart is softening, and he's less focused on Itachi and more focused on his teammates. But all the friendship in the world was going to make Sasuke forget that Itachi massacred his entire clan and family. On top of that, the idea of Sasuke and Itachi having a fated death match wasn't only up to Sasuke. We learned from the Howling Wolf Village light novel that revolves around Sasuke's life after killing Itachi, that Itachi very purposely kept himself alive with very powerful and specific drugs, all so that he could live long enough to be killed by Sasuke. See, Itachi read the stone tablet that was altered by Black Zetsu in the Uchiha hideout, with both his regular Sharingan and his MS Awakening. And thus, so far as Itachi understood, the only way to get more powerful as an Uchiha was 1, to kill your best friend, and 2, to take the MS of your siblings who also had that awakening. So far as Itachi understood, if he wanted to make sure that Sasuke would one day become powerful enough so that people like Danzo couldn't mess with his life, the death and then subsequent taking of Itachi's eyes was a necessity. So even if Sasuke found it in his heart to forgive his brother, which he wouldn't have done, there was always going to be some kind of death match between Itachi and Sasuke. However, if Sasuke had stayed in Konoha, how Sasuke would have gone after Itachi would have changed. Get to that in a moment. Let's first go chronologically and figure out the timeline of events that would unfold if Sasuke had stayed in Konoha. And most important thing to consider here is that if Sasuke had stayed in Konoha, he wouldn't/couldn't use the curse mark. 1, nobody in Konoha was really chill with it, knowing that it came from Orochimaru, and 2, the more he used it, the more subservient he would become to Orochimaru. Not that anybody in Konoha knew that. And while yes, Sasuke used the curse mark a ton in the original timeline and never became so subservient to Orochimaru that he wasn't able to eventually kill them, I'm not going to use that as a way to say, oh, Sasuke could use the curse mark totally fine in this divergent timeline, because morally it just wouldn't align with this iteration of Sasuke. And the reason I'm kind of rehashing this point is because it means that Sasuke would have to prioritize getting strong in different ways. And one of those different ways wouldn't be training with Naruto. See, Naruto doesn't leave during the time skip simply because he wants to get strong enough to hunt down Sasuke. Naruto leaves during the time skip because he wants to train with Jiraiya. And the combined forces of Jiraiya and Tsunade understand that Naruto is at his safest if he is 1, outside of Konoha, and 2, with Jiraiya, who is currently one of the strongest people in the entire universe when he's spending time with Naruto. And thus, the idea of Naruto going out to train with Jiraiya is actually more of a political decision than it is a training decision, which is actually rather obviously shown in the fact that Naruto comes back from years of training with Jiraiya with the grand total of a big ball Rasengan and being able to break out of Genjutsu to show for it. But does this mean that Sasuke would leave the village to train too? No, there's really no rhyme or reason to the possible explanation of Sasuke would leave the village with Jiraiya as well, especially when we're considering that in this universe, the reason that Sasuke actually decides to not leave Konoha is a conversation he has with Kakashi. Tie that into the fact that even though we did say that Sasuke training with Jiraiya would lead to a stronger iteration of Sasuke, the only correct choice of person to train Sasuke, if given the option, is Kakashi. Kakashi is the only person on Earth outside of Obito and Shin Uchiha who will be able to teach Sasuke Sasuke about what a Mangekyo Sharingan is and how to use it. Tie that into the fact that the core of Sasuke's abilities tie back to the Chidori that Kakashi taught him, and that Kakashi would be able to tell Sasuke about how Sasuke could eventually awaken a Mangekyo Sharingan, and assuming in this universe that Sasuke is not evil and therefore does not want to kill Naruto or Sakura, the only person who would truly be able to direct him in the right direction, which was Itachi, would be Kakashi. And thus, over the course of the time skip, Sasuke would train with Kakashi, and this would be massively more advantageous for him than training with Orochimaru, who also kind of taught him nothing. See, if hypothetically Sasuke did train with Kakashi, Kakashi would be able to amp up his lightning release, kind of like how Jiraiya would be able to amp up his fire release. Both Kakashi and Sasuke eventually developed Chidori variants. Sasuke uses things like Chidori Sharp Spear and Chidori Senbon, while Kakashi uses things like Raikiri Tracking Fang. The fact that both of them were able to come up with these variants on their own means that they'd probably be able to come up with a whole lot more if they were working together, training together every single day. On top of this, it is completely not unreasonable to assume that if Sasuke was training with Kakashi, he would still learn Kirin, as we're told that during the time skip, Sasuke teaches himself Kirin. So training with Orochimaru really had nothing to do with it. So if he was training with Kakashi, then he'd still probably figure it out. On top of that, the usage of Kirin is not tied to the unleashing of the curse mark. But more than that, Kakashi would also be able to hone Sasuke's Eye of Perception. See, every Sharingan has two categories, the Eye of Perception and the Eye of Deception. One aspect of the Sharingan allows you to track people's movements more accurately and guess where they're going to do, what hand signs they're going to do, and so on and so forth. While the Eye of Deception is tied mostly into Genjutsu. Zabuza explained all of this to us. Now, Madara, while he was fighting against Sasuke, said something very interesting that never really got fleshed out in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, which was, while Madara was looking deep into the eyes of Sasuke, he said that Sasuke, like him, had the straight Tomei variation of the Sharingan, implying that Madara and Sasuke's Sharingans operate somewhat similarly. We then learned through this conversation that the straight Tomei Sharingan is better at tracking movement, which would explain things like how Genin Sasuke was able to copy Rock Lee's Reverse Lotus and turn it into his Lion's Barrage. On top of this is why hitting Sasuke is so incredibly difficult. His Eye of Perception is naturally greater than even other Sharingan users, which is how he's able to do things like reading opponents' moves so massively that he's able to use their hands to make hand signs and blow giant fireballs in their face. And if there is one person, and I mean literally one person, who could have helped Sasuke hone his Eye of Perception to the point where he'd be able to copy the moves and jutsus of anybody he ever fought, even if it was just once or in passing, that person would be Kakashi. Kakashi, the copy ninja, the man who knows over 1,000 jutsu. Kakashi, much in the same way that he used both the Eye of Perception and Deception in his battle against Zabuza in the Land of Waves arc, could have taught Sasuke the intricacies of matching the jutsus being used against you and using Genjutsu to trick people into using the jutsus you want them to use. However, considering the fact that Sasuke was a natural-born Sharingan user with 2 Sharingans as opposed to Kakashi's 1, his perception abilities would be greater than even that of Kakashi's, and thus there's really no reason for us to assume that Sasuke wouldn't be faster with a better reaction time and more jutsu under his belt if he trained with Kakashi as opposed to Orochimaru. On top of that, I genuinely believe that if Sasuke had stayed in Konoha when Naruto had dipped out for a couple of years with Jiraiya, that instead of just spending all day every day with Kakashi, that Sasuke would have formed a secondary rivalry with Rock Lee. See, the only reason that Rock Lee and Sasuke never get to relive the battle that Might Guy broke up with his turtle is because by the time that Rock Lee recovers from the Chunin exams, Sasuke's already gone. But you are wrong if you think that Rock Lee and Sasuke could cohabitate in the same village without squaring up again. In fact, I'm not the first person to talk on this idea. Rock Lee and his ninja pals, Naruto's original spin-off, has Rock Lee as the main protagonist, and guess who his key antagonist is? Sasuke. If Rock Lee and Sasuke had spent years in the same village, then they probably would have developed a relationship similar to that of Kakashi and Might Guy, especially when you consider the fact that Sasuke would be being trained by Kakashi. More likely than not, Naruto would have come back from his time with Jiraiya and have lost his best friend to Rock Lee. And thus, over the course of that time skip era, not only would have Sasuke learned a bunch more jutsus and honed his lightning release, but repeated rivalry taijutsu matches against Rock Lee, whose speed was able to outmatch that of Gaara's defensive sand, would not only massively increase Sasuke's taijutsu prowess, but also increase his Eye of Perception prowess. And as iron sharpens iron, Rock Lee also would have come out of that time skip much stronger, as the need to outpace Sasuke's Sharingan would have pushed him further and further, and thus ultimately Sasuke coming out of the time skip ends up as strong, if not a little bit weaker than he is in the main timeline. Because listen, the curse mark is a pretty big buff. It's essentially Sage mode. But this time around, at the end of the time skip, when Naruto returned to Konoha, the rest of Team 7 would be there waiting for him, and thus immediately the rivalry between Naruto and Sasuke would be reignited as Team 7 was reformed, and thus we entered the post-time skip era. The first real thing that happens chronologically after the time skip is the Kazekage rescue mission, as Deidara attacks the Hidden Sand Village, eventually leading to Gaara's subsequent defeat. Gaara is hauled off by Deidara and Sasori to have Shukaku ripped out of him and placed into the ghetto statue. However, in order to make sure that the newly found Kazekage isn't killed within the first couple of years of him becoming the new Kazekage, a team from Konoha subsisting of Naruto, Sakura, and Kakashi is sent to save him. However, in this alternate universe, Sasuke would also be involved. And while in this alternate universe, the battle against Sasori would still most likely boil down to Great Ichigo and Sakura, and this would mean instead of Naruto and Kakashi chasing Deidara, it would actually be Naruto, Kakashi, and Sasuke. And strictly based off the fact that I have no idea, and nobody has any idea how Sasuke got his Hawk summon Garuda, we're gonna assume that this alternate version of Sasuke also stumbled upon giant hawks. Don't say it had anything to do with Orochimaru. We simply don't know that. But in this hypothetical circumstance, where the combined forces of Naruto, Sasuke, and Kakashi are pursuing Deidara, presumably on Garuda, I don't think Deidara makes it out of this fight alive, because just the combined forces of Naruto and Kakashi was enough to send Deidara away from this fight with one less arm. You throw a post-time skip Sasuke into that equation, and Deidara's not walking away. But consider the fact that Deidara, after losing his arm in this fight against Kakashi and Naruto, basically doesn't accomplish anything until he dies in combat to Sasuke. That's kind of fitting. Now, immediately after the Kazekage retrieval arc comes the reunion arc, where the new iteration of Team 7 comes face to face with Sasuke and Orochimaru, which eventually leads to Naruto crashing out, awakening to a version 2 four-tailed Jinchuriki cloak, and fighting against Orochimaru. However, as Sasuke never ran away with Orochimaru in this timeline, technically this arc wouldn't happen. But in a way, it also kind of would. See, here's the thing. In the same way that the Sasuke and Itachi deathmatch was always going to happen, because both of the parties involved wanted it to happen, and Sasuke is saying, you know what, I don't know if I need Orochimaru, doesn't mean that Orochimaru is done with Sasuke. I'd like to remind you that it isn't Sasuke who sought out Orochimaru in the first place. It was the opposite. And so in the hypothetical universe where Sasuke gets his own head out of his behind and decides he doesn't need Orochimaru, doesn't mean that Orochimaru is going to stop trying to use Sasuke as a perfect vessel. But if Sasuke flipped Orochimaru, the proverbial bird, and was actively being protected by Konoha, which is the reason he wouldn't be sent out of Konoha like Naruto, because they understand that the second that Sasuke was sent out of Konoha, Orochimaru would come to find him. Over the course of the 3 years that the time skip covers, eventually, because Orochimaru has to switch into a new body immediately after his fight against Hiruzen, Orochimaru would once again have to switch bodies, and thus he would once again try to pursue Sasuke, or another perfect vessel. However, unfortunately, perfect vessels are kind of hard to come by. Itachi is obviously off limits as he's too strong for Orochimaru to take over. Kimimaro is presumably already dead at this moment, even though there's no Sasuke retrieval arc. If Itachi is too strong, then Nagato is definitely too strong, which leaves really only one possible choice for Orochimaru to switch into, and that would be Shin Uchiha. See, Orochimaru wants to switch into a body that has the Sharingan because of his fascination with how it works. Orochimaru wants to understand how every jutsu, ninjutsu, taijutsu, and dojutsu operates on Earth. And the Sharingan is unfortunately kind of a blank spot for them. And so in the hypothetical universe where both Itachi and Sasuke are off limits, it would make a fair amount of sense to me that Orochimaru would identify Shin Uchiha as the perfect candidate to switch into. And before any of you go, oh, Orochimaru and Shin Uchiha weren't together at this point, yes, they were. Orochimaru literally takes Shin Uchiha's arm off his body and grafts it onto Danzo so Danzo can have a Sharingan arm. Which also means at this point in time, Shin Uchiha was also covered in Sharingan. And so if I'm Orochimaru and I can't get to Sasuke, I switch into Shin, whose body also has the incredible little aspect of being able to accept any and all foreign tissue, making it real easy if you're Orochimaru to graft new things onto you and test them out. It also means that maybe, just maybe, Shin Uchiha's body won't push back against Orochimaru like all other bodies have. But assuming in the scenario where Orochimaru does take over Shin Uchiha's body at the moment when he wanted to take over Sasuke's body, you know, when Sasuke stabs him, in the hypothetical circumstance where Shin Uchiha is not a perfect vessel for Orochimaru, then once again Orochimaru would have to be persistent in their pursuit of Sasuke. And thus this reunion arc where Team 7 finds himself up against the likes of Kabuto and Orochimaru could happen. However, in this telling of the story, rather than trying to beat up Orochimaru for taking Sasuke, Team 7 would be trying to beat up Orochimaru so they don't take Sasuke. And while Orochimaru controlling Shin Uchiha's body would be a crazy buff, let's assume for the sake of this hypothetical universe that Team 7 is able to get away from Orochimaru. They return to Konoha, where they're introduced to the likes of Yamato. See, just because Sasuke decides to stick around in Konoha does not mean that Naruto has any more control over Kurama. And thus Yamato, at some point or another, would need to be introduced to Team 7 to help Naruto train. However, unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Sai, who is operating as a replacement for Sasuke. However, because Sai is never introduced to Team 7, technically Danzo and the Root have much less influence on what happens with Team 7. Now, at this point in the story, with Yamato introduced, Naruto would begin to work on a long-range option Rasengan, and thus much like he does in the original timeline, him, Yamato, and Kakashi would go to create the Rasen Shuriken. But a lot of you are probably thinking, but Nick, doesn't this strip Sasuke of any and all ability to train with Kakashi? Yes, it does. Kind of. See, at this point in the story, by the time that Sasuke has spent a couple years training with Kakashi, much in the same way that Boruto was able to catch up with Sasuke after spending a year training with him, there wouldn't be a crazy amount Kakashi could teach Sasuke. And thus, much in the same way that new tactics would have to be created to train these absolutely problematically powerful children, like Naruto now needing Kakashi and Yamato to work together with him to create the Rasen Shuriken, Sasuke would have to look into alternative means to get stronger. And this is where Orochimaru comes into play. See, Sasuke could see Orochimaru's persistence and his desire to have him as a vessel. On top of that, Sasuke would see the Shin Uchiha body and all of the Sharingan. And Konoha would have the information, at least from Jiraiya, that Orochimaru was once a part of the Akatsuki and therefore should have some pretty vital Akatsuki information. And thus, much in the same way that Konoha decided to send Jiraiya to the Hidden Rain Village by himself, there is a real, legitimate possibility that the combination of wanting to see how Orochimaru could make Sasuke stronger and also the spy potential and information that Sasuke could glean from Orochimaru would lead to Konoha sending Sasuke as a double agent, much in the same way that Orochimaru sent Kabuto as a double agent to the Akatsuki, to Orochimaru to try and get as much information and as much power out of them as possible. And thus Sasuke would defect as a spy to Orochimaru with the goal of trying to learn as much as possible. And thus Sasuke would have a much more direct approach in how he spent this time with Orochimaru. Maybe he would use his curse mark, or maybe he would seek alternative means for gaining strength. See, assuming the curse mark had some kind of crazy seal on it that either Jiraiya or Kakashi was able to place on it, Sasuke could instead persist to try and find power in other ways. Other ways like a possible Snake Sage mode. And here's the thing, the idea of Orochimaru not trying to make Sasuke into a Snake Sage has never made all that much sense. Yes, obviously, Orochimaru is kind of a failed Snake Sage. And yeah, Orochimaru was able to give Sasuke a curse mark that allowed for him to access the Senjutsu chakra of Orochimaru. So both of them had some kind of watered down, weak iteration of Snake Sage mode. However, if Sasuke were to truly be Orochimaru's perfect vessel, wouldn't it be kind of cool to not only have the Sharingan, but also Snake Sage mode, something that Orochimaru was unable to accomplish in their original body? And thus I do believe in this universe where Sasuke is going to Orochimaru to get stronger, and that strength isn't tied to the curse mark. And not only would Sasuke learn things like how to summon Manda, but also Snake Sage mode, something that he would absolutely be skilled and strong enough to learn. However, after Sasuke learned Snake Sage mode, Orochimaru would try to take over his body. However, just like how Itachi was able to use his Sharingan to flip this attempt back on Orochimaru, Sasuke would do the same thing to Orochimaru, killing him in much the same way as he does in the original timeline. And by the time that Sasuke returns to Konoha from this mission with Orochimaru, Naruto has already learned the Rasen Shuriken, and Kakuzo and Hidan are dead. It's now, at this point in time, with the newfound power of Snake Sage mode, that Team 7 would begin their search for Itachi. Because, yes, it would be a team-wide search. They wouldn't let Sasuke go off by his own. But the boosted power of everything that he learned from Orochimaru would give Sasuke the confidence to go and challenge Itachi. But I'm not saying that the entirety of Team 7 is trying to kick down Itachi's door to kill him. Naruto, Sakura, and Kakashi would all want to capture Itachi, so they could glean as much information about the Akatsuki from him as possible. But Sasuke, who might have told the rest of Team 7 that he doesn't need to kill Itachi, would absolutely be going to kill Itachi. Now, fortunately for us, this fight would also kind of pan out in a very similar way. See, because for those of you who remember, when Sasuke was fighting against Itachi, Team 7 was not far away. Team 7 and the rest of the Konoha shinobi who were trying to hunt down Sasuke before he could kill Itachi during this whole arc were being purposely stalled by the likes of Obito. And I think if Team 7 were to pull up on Itachi's hideout, something very similar would happen. See, Obito wants Sasuke to kill Itachi. See, because Obito wants to take advantage of Sasuke after he kills Itachi and tell him all about how Itachi was like how he was because Konoha forced him to be that way. And thus Obito's main goal in all of this would be to distract the rest of Team 7 long enough so Sasuke could go forward to fight Itachi. And once again, that fight would pan out in a very similar way. Team 7 trying to grapple with Obito and failing, and Sasuke battling against Itachi and eventually killing him, but only after having Orochimaru pulled out of him by Itachi. And after this fight concludes, Obito, who still wants Sasuke on his side, mind you, as he understands that Sasuke is the kind of person to dedicate his entire life to killing his brother over a clan massacre that he had a hand in, mind you, but after Sasuke successfully kills Itachi in their one-on-one combat, would once again kidnap Sasuke and tell him all about Itachi's life. However, it's after Sasuke hears all this from Obito that the timelines begin to diverge. See, hearing all of this would enrage Sasuke, specifically towards Danzo, who Sasuke knows is in Konoha. And as Sasuke would still have free and unfettered access into Konoha, Sasuke would still rage and destroy Obito's hideout after awakening his Susanoo. But I think that in this moment, Sasuke would have the idea to take Itachi's eyes. See, because here's the thing. In the main timeline, where Sasuke hears the truth of Itachi's life, he decides to not take Itachi's eyes immediately. Rather, he decides to create Heavy with the rest of Orochimaru's washouts and go do a bunch of Akatsuki-esque missions, like trying to kill Killer Bee. However, in this universe where Sasuke hasn't defected from Konoha and still has love for his friends and family, well, I guess found family, I don't think he would just jump on this opportunity to join the Akatsuki. I think rather this iteration of Sasuke would be able to immediately focus his attention on Danzo, who he, as a resident of Konoha, has access to. And thus I think Sasuke would actually skip a couple of steps that lead to his fight against Danzo. Thus Sasuke would actually take Itachi's eyes and fuse them with his own, awakening to an EMS. Also, Itachi's eyes can see the revenge that he's about to bring to Danzo's front doorstep. Now, obviously, Obito would be down with all of this because this wouldn't be the first time that Obito pulled the pin out of a grenade and threw it into the center of Konoha, but nobody else inside of Konoha would be okay with this. As Sasuke is a ninja, I'm assuming he would bide his time until he was in the same room as Danzo, at which point the battle that took place on the bridge would take place between Sasuke and Danzo. However, now there's a lot of other factors, like the fact that this fight would take place in Konoha. Now, immediately, as Danzo is one of the elders and therefore like a pseudo Hokage, the rest of Team 7 would either assume that Sasuke is under some form of genjutsu or assume that he's lost it, and thus they would try to stop him, and thus a fight between Sasuke and Naruto would ensue. However, Naruto, being Naruto, would see through to the core of Sasuke and realize that Sasuke isn't under genjutsu and that something is actually well and truly wrong. And thus, the beauty of this fight taking place in Konoha is that the allegations hurled against Danzo could be immediately proven true. The chakra signatures of the multiple Sharingan in Danzo's arms and the one in his face that ties back to Shisui could be confirmed, and immediately everybody in Konoha would realize that Danzo's a bad guy. This could be done by Hinata, Neji, any of the Hyuga. Hell, it could even be done by Kakashi. Because assuming in this hypothetical universe, Kakashi had to fight against a Shin Uchiha-controlled Orochimaru, considering the fact that Shin Uchiha's arm is slapped onto Danzo, the similarity of the chakra signatures between Shin Uchiha and Danzo's right arm could confirm to everybody in Konoha that, hey, Danzo's been working with Orochimaru. And thus, as the walls begin to close in around Danzo, he would have to activate the root to try a hostile takeover of Konoha, the coup he was trying to avoid. However, because the fighting force of Konoha is much stronger than the fighting force of the root, Sai, and Danzo would be stomped out in this rebellion. It's in the same way that Danzo warned that the Uchiha, though strong, would be stomped out by the Great Foot of Konoha. However, this infighting does lead to a substantially weakened Konoha. And mind you, while all this is going on, Jiraiya is in the Hidden Rain investigating Nagato. Jiraiya and Itachi die like 3 episodes apart from each other. And Sasuke being in Konoha doesn't mean that Jiraiya is not getting sent to the Hidden Rain. So Jiraiya's dead. Jiraiya dies. And thus, post this rebellion and Jiraiya's death, Konoha is at its absolute weakest. And thus, Nagato decides there's never been a better reason to finish the job. And while Konoha is still absolutely devastated by the pain assault, the combined forces of Tsunade, Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto are able to use some iteration of the new Gen 3-way deadlock and defeat the Six Paths of Pain without Naruto losing his mind and turning into the 8-tailed version of Kurama. Now, this does mean that Naruto doesn't get to meet Kushina or Minato and his mind palace, but it does mean that Naruto doesn't have to get so close to dying because he's not fighting against Nagato one-on-one. Now, Naruto in this universe is still able to talk no jutsu Nagato into bringing everybody back to life. However, as Nagato's life force is fading away, Sasuke is able to warn Team 7, Nagato, and Konan about the dangers of Obito and what he believes he's planning, something that Nagato and Konan would absolutely be able to confirm as they know about the Eye of the Moon plan and how important the Rinnegan is in it. And thus, as everybody involved in the rebuilding of Konoha and the death of Nagato is made crucially aware of just how dangerous Obito is and just how badly he wants those Rinnegan, Team 7 insists to Konan that the Rinnegan stay in Konoha, and she agrees, and thus Konan survives. Now, immediately after the Pain invasion, Tsunade calls for a 5 Kage summit. 1, to address how Konoha was devastated, and 2, to talk about the possible moves of the Akatsuki. And while this 5 Kage summit is not interrupted like it is in the original timeline, Obito identifies that while all 5 Kage are occupied talking to each other, that much in the same way that the night of Kushina's pregnancy was the best possible moment to break into Konoha, right now is the best possible time to break into Konoha to steal the Rinnegan. However, as Obito breaks into Konoha, he finds himself head-to-head in combat against Kakashi. And thus Kakashi and Obito have their fated one-on-one reunion, in which Kakashi, who mind you is able to battle against 1 Rinnegan, 1 Sharingan Obito, is able to stall Obito for long enough that the rest of Team 7 is able to get onto the scene, forcing Obito to retreat. Now, to this point, that the power of Obito, his desires, and his ability to break into Konoha would make everybody in Konoha realize that the Rinnegan needs to be used, and thus the Rinnegan would have to be given to compatible users. And thus I believe in the immediacy, 1 Rinnegan would be given to Sasuke, as he wouldn't have enough chakra to maintain both, and another Rinnegan would be given to Naruto, who would have enough chakra to maintain both, but didn't have enough control over Kurama to have both 2 Rinnegan and Kurama. However, I don't believe Naruto would be given a Rinnegan until he was able to get control over Kurama, and thus Naruto would need to go train with Killer Bee, go to the Waterfall of Truth, and all that, and unlock KCM-1 before he was able to take the toll of 1 Rinnegan. And thus both Naruto and Sasuke would go into the war arc with 1 Rinnegan each, which makes things real tough for Obito, who not only doesn't have control over the ghetto statue, but also has nobody in his organization who does. However, fortunately for Obito, somebody's on the way, and that person is Madara, who comes back to life, mind you, through the hands of Kabuto, and with 2 Rinnegan. And thus Naruto, Sasuke, and Madara would all be in a tug-of-war for control of the ghetto statue, as it only responds to the outer path. A tug-of-war that Madara, who's more powerful and has more experience, would win. And after Madara gained control of the ghetto statue and is able to impose his incredible power on the battlefield of the 4th Great Shinobi World War, much in the same way that he does in the original timeline, he would defeat Sasuke in combat, plucking a Rinnegan out of his face. He would then place that Rinnegan in the controlled by a black Zetsu Obito and force him to use Rinne Rebirth on Madara to revive him. However, in this hypothetical universe where Obito is never Jubito, this kills Obito, and Madara once again takes his Rinnegan from him and places it in his face, revived. Now in this universe, Sasuke has no reason to bring Orochimaru back to life. Sasuke would have been training with Konoha. He wouldn't have thought of Orochimaru. He wouldn't have thought of bringing back the Hokage. And thus the only people standing between Madara and the complete and total decimation of Earth are the Kage, Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi. However, with Sasuke's Rinnegan ripped out of his face, the only person who stands a chance in combat against Madara is Naruto, who doesn't have enough power to fight him on his own. And thus as Madara begins to impose his will on Team 7 in the Shinobi Alliance, point that Hagoromo steps in to save Naruto and Sasuke, giving them the same buffs that they receive in the original timeline, that is a Rinne Sharingan to Sasuke's now empty eye hole, and a chakra boost and healing factor to Naruto. And the combined forces of a Sage of 6 Paths Naruto with a Rinnegan and 6 Tomei Rinnegan Sasuke are able to defeat Madara. Like, kill him. Dead. At which point Kage would take over his body because he didn't need to be alive for Kage to take him over. But like with the battle against Madara, this iteration of Sasuke that not only has Snake Sage mode, but also the 6 Tomei Rinnegan, effectively making him the new gen Sage of 6 Paths. Naruto, who also has a Rinnegan and Sage of 6 Paths chakra and also a Sage mode, also kind of making him the new gen Sage of 6 Paths, would be able to relatively easily defeat Kaguya, even if it doesn't mean DMS Kakashi, because Obito's already long dead, and him and Kakashi never exactly make up in this universe. And oh yeah, Sakura is there as well. And thus this universe plays out pretty similarly to that of the original timeline. Because if we're being real, in all the times that truly matter, Sasuke is aligned with Konoha. And when Sasuke tries to do something that's inherently terroristic against Konoha or any other major village, it doesn't pan out. He doesn't kill Killer Bee. He doesn't kill any of the Kage. He kills Danzo, but he'd probably do that in any timeline where he found out what Danzo did to Itachi. And Danzo's death doesn't actually mean that much because Danzo wasn't actually as important as the plot made it seem. So what would happen if Sasuke stayed in Konoha? Kind of a lot of the same, but I'm curious to hear from you guys. What do you think would happen if Sasuke never left the village? Let me know in the comments below. And while it goes down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Excuse me, I'm gonna go rest my voice for 12 hours.